I welcome all of you to the second day of our national webinar titled Negotiating Gender and Games. We are delighted to have with us Dr. Pinaki, Associate Professor, Raja Piri Mohan College, as the guest today. We heartily welcome him and are indeed grateful that he could make time for this webinar. I now request our head of the department, Dr. Juvenile Collaboration, to introduce the theme of the webinar for our new listeners. Unmute yourself, please.
I cannot hear. Hello? Yeah.
I think there is again and done. Dr. Ghosh got disconnected. She'll be joining in a moment. Please bear with us. Hello. Can you hear?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I'm not too sure whether you can hear.
I can hear you, but I think we've lost connecting with Umbrella.
That's fine. Let's wait for. I don't know. How to go about it. I have no problem with anything.
We can wait for a few.
Yeah. Of course we can. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, despite the interruptions and problems that we have every single day, I again cordially welcome Dr. Pinaki, and I also take this opportunity to thank Dr. Juvenile for our facility and this is just a recapitulation for those who did not join us yesterday for yesterday's session. Just a brief reiteration that the objective of the webinar is intended to negotiate issues of gender and race. Interrelating the issues of gender and race are of utmost importance for all of us to in our daily grappling with theories, whether outside the classroom or through our everyday lived experiences. So again, I had mentioned yesterday that basically which had originated with feminist movements in the Laura Mulvey has eventually translated to linguistics and our lived context. And this is where we started. This is where we started working for our webinar and its open lectures. Yesterday, our invited speaker navigated beyond the set boundaries which had been trying to go into issues of the ways in which reversal and questioning the contextualized and had a very beautiful presentation. Today, we are raised up to the enlightenment by talking about the growing formats and handling of issues and concerns that we are now, especially the topic of Travancore, which is specialization and its working, for which is known not only in the country but all the world, which finally which will, I am confident, open up the vital, fascinating and important unexplored vistas for us all. And I sincerely hope and anticipate today's session shall also be us. And having said this, I want to welcome you all to the second conversation. I now request my student Elisa Lashkar from semester 4 to semester 4 to welcome our speakers.
A very good evening to all our respected dignitaries, my dear friends and my juniors. I am Iltisam Lashkar on the behalf of the Department of English. Take this privilege to warmly welcome Dr. Pinaki to deliver his talk on zero social distancing, comics and gender issues on day 2 of the webinar on negotiating gender ethics. It is an honor and a privilege for us to have you with us today. I am sure we will be enriched by the webinar. Now, I would like to call upon our HOD ma'am, Dr. Untitled Chapter, to introduce our honored guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. And as I said, Dr. Dave Nanda, as he was recorded, does not need any introduction. Then this is again a form of protocol and also a kind of information for anybody who has not had the opportunity to listen to before this. Dr. Pinaki is a multi-award winning illustrator and designer who regularly works for renowned publishers like Random House, Travancore Tale, Writers, President West, President West, Bloomsbury, Voting Platform, and Permanent Plan, Alchem, Sage, Royal Science Academy, Rupa, and many others. He has designed almost 500 book covers to date. He's the winner of the Publishing Next Prize for the Best Book Cover Design in India, twice in the years 2017 and 2019. His book cover for Calcutta, Kunal Bakshi, won the prestigious Oxford Bookstore Prize for the Best Cover Design in India at Jaipur 2017. His layout of design on the Untitled manuscripts has drawn accolades from all across the country. A Charles Wallace Trust Fellow, his PhD is in comics theory. Pinaki is one of the editors of the prestigious annual magazine Long Form, published from HarperCollins 2018, which is generally regarded as the first global comics magazine from India. He's the Indian Comics Advisor of Panacea, the biggest ever exhibition on Asian comics curated by Paul Radet for the Barbican London. His book-length Comics and Partition is due next year. He juggles his creative work with academics as he has a day job as an associate professor of Raja Theory Mohan College, Gurudwara. So what an illustrious career in that, something that all of us look up to. It's the reason that we look up to you for your very endearing ways, unassuming ways, despite the wonderful CV that you carry. And with this, and without much ado, I request you to now kindly deliver your talk.
So am I audible? Am I clearly audible? Thank you, Indrila, for that, that introduction, which I really don't deserve. I'm basically basically a very simple man, and frankly, I'll be very, very. I cannot be too official in the way I deliver lectures because I always see lectures as conversations. Okay, here of course we will have virtual conversations literally because you cannot see me physically. But even then, it's a good start. First of all, I'm thankful to everybody at Diamond Harbour University, Women's University, who is of course a wonderful scholar and a great friend. But there are many others whom I actually know who actually work there. And I can see the list that there are many people whom I actually know. They are listening to me. So it's a bit of a, kind of a homecoming for me. It's a bit of an opportunity to take, liberty to draw people into a kind of a fruitful conversation. So what I'll try to do is I try to loosen up a bit and, begin with a more kind of an unconventional approach. Okay, so let me begin. And many people actually know the things that I want to tell, but today I have arranged it in a slightly different way. Now, look, when you are talking about the ideas of gender and gaze, and you are talking about comics, of course, there are many people who come to mind. And what I'll do is today is to avoid those people, and I'll be talking actually about our country in the context of our country. That means I will try to talk about what is happening here rather than what is happening abroad, because most of you may actually know what is happening outside our country, but blissfully unaware of what is really happening. So if you look at the idea of comics, the whole evolution of comics, there has been very strong women, creators, and we cannot deny that. So if say for example Marjorie Satrapi, whose Persepolis became a kind of a cult hit, but there are others like Alison Bechdel, Jessica Abel, Gabrielle Bell, Julie Touché, Rutu Modan, Posey Simmons. I can just go on naming them, but it doesn't actually mean anything to us, right? They are doing wonderful work outside, but what are we doing? What are we contributing in real time to the way we look at our problem? And as we all know, there are huge issues in the way Indian societies are set up, the kind of patriarchy that is almost ingrained in Indian society. So what are women artists doing here? How are they fighting back? How are they actually trying to, really talk about themselves? How are they integrating their personal narratives with things that have more deeper, larger implications? Because what is personal immediately becomes public, and what is public actually becomes personal. How do they negotiate that line, that fine line between the personal and the public? So what I'll do, of course, is give you some directions, the things that are being done. And what I'll try to impress upon all of you is that these are things that you too can do it. The students who are hearing me, the students who have faced, say, problems at home, they cannot articulate that, they can draw themselves, they can actually express themselves by drawing or by writing a story or almost confessing to what they really want to say. The whole comics become a kind of a confessional, because I strongly believe that comics, more than any medium, is also a form which talks about resistance. Resistance against everything, resistance against establishment, resistance against patriarchy, whatever. So you need to speak your mind. So what I'll try to do is, of course, I will go on to a presentation, because while I present, you will actually understand what is happening in real time. So let me begin with, when we talk about comics in India and we talk about women artists, we normally talk of, say, Amruta Patil, because Amruta is very well known. We talk about, Kari, for example, the book that she wrote, and of course she followed it up with wonderful books. One is, of course, called Adi Parva, which is a reworking of Mahabharata. Another is called Soptic, and lately she has published Aranyaka. But what I want to begin, of course, because I'll not talk about Amruta, because Amruta is already well known. Let me talk about small projects. Let me talk about people you don't know. Let me talk about people you should know and find out. And and let me think. Let me actually guide you to what they actually do. First of all, for all purpose, the person who started it all is Manjula Padmanabhan. And if you know Manjula, Manjula is basically a cartoonist. She is also a wonderful, children's writer and, a dramatist. She has actually written a brilliant work called Harvest, which is basically a play which you can read. It's like a science fiction dystopian play. But she started her career as a cartoonist, and with a very interesting, cartoon strip. So this is not strictly what I call comics or a graphic novel, but these are basically one-page comic, if you want to call it. They are strips because they are carried out in newspapers. In fact, as early as 1982, Manjula started, drawing a character called Suki, and I will just show you Suki, how she looks like. So, I'm sorry, just a minute. I'm sorry, just a minute. What is happening? Okay, let me show you Suki if I can, because somehow I think it is stuck. Again, I'm sorry for the technical problems, but why should it happen in a way? Okay, so let me talk first and then I will show you Suki's work. I can actually show it through, internet as well. So if you look at the character of Suki by Manjula Padmanabhan, you will understand that she's someone, for example, so if you look at Suki's work, for example, this is Suki. So can you see? This is how the strip looked like. And, Suki was first published in 1982. It came out in the Hindu Business Line. Initially it came out in the Sunday Observer. Then, of course, it somehow stopped, and then it shifted in 1992 to the Pioneer, and later it restarted. Later it restarted in 1992. Later in the Hindu Business Line, and then it was renamed as Suki Yaki. But if you look at Suki, the character, you can understand that it deals with stereotypes. The way we stereotype the image of a girl or a woman, okay, in our society. For example, the very idea of a kind of a fat woman here is being played upon in this very simple strip. So these are the kind of strip that was published regularly. You can see the panels are all democratic because they are of equal length and height. And you can see that, the whole narrative is like a very short, sarcastic comment on the way you look at Suki. Okay, so Suki is the beginning of what I called women expressing themselves through comics medium. It was wry, humorous, sarcastic, but in a way it never pushed the boundaries. Okay, so Manjula, if you're really interested, Manjula, you can see Manjula's work in. I'm sorry why this is happening. I have no idea why this is happening, but just a moment. Yes. So basically, you can see Manjula's work in Double Talk, which was basically the name of the strip. It is actually published by Penguin. I don't know whether it's available yet, but this actually is the standard that was set by Manjula. That became a kind of what I call, a kind of a gold standard. She was wonderful in the way she talked about Suki. But as I told you, Suki is also, Manjula never pushed the boundaries to its limits. Okay, that was done, I think, after the millennium. It is only after I think 2000, and we actually got, works that really pushed the boundaries and wanted to talk to us in a much more engaging manner. In fact, Manjula later came up with very interesting works. This is one of her new works where she is actually talking about Me Too, for example. And if you understand, this is, she's almost summarizing the Me Too movement, or the way the Me Too movement can actually explode or implode in India, through these, simple cartoons. So if you look at Manjula's work, for example, this is Manjula's work, you can find that there is a kind of a simplicity to it, so it's very conversational in tone, dialogue heavy, and Suki is that, befuddled character trying to make her way through a world which she actually, cannot make sense of. But, after Suki, we didn't see too much, especially in terms of comics. And as you can understand, like all other institutions, comics is also a very patriarchal institution. Everybody, most of the people at the helm, are male, and that necessarily may not be bad, but what happens is, the women artists, didn't find, I think, ideal ways to push the boundaries. I think with internet, things began to change. Things began to become more democratic. People began to express themselves in a much, much interesting way. Let me look at a diasporic, woman who actually is creating waves now. And her name, she's a Canadian woman, but Indian by origin, you can understand, Aminder Dhaliwal. And she created, a comic book called Woman World. This is the book. There are two books that she has written. This is the first book that she has written. She has now actually come up with another book, and that is actually called, Cyclopedia Exotica. I'm sorry that I am having problems today, but I hope, things get better. Yes, so Cyclopedia Exotica by Aminder Dhaliwal. These two books, are now cult books today. But, Aminder didn't start with print. And that's a very, very important tendency to know. Why I begin with Aminder, because she is a recent example. I should have ideally, gone chronologically. But I didn't do that because I want to show what you people, what everybody can do by actually telling Aminder's example. Aminder didn't start with print. Normally we try to write a book, print it, take it to the people, and then, get some feedback. Or maybe later make it into different media. But Aminder didn't do that. What Aminder did was, Aminder started with the web. And let me show you what Aminder did. So, the first work, which is called The Woman World, is actually about a story about a female utopia where men is extinct. Okay? So it has been 80 years since men went extinct, and we are looking at a world which is actually wholly, they are all woman world. That's why it's called Woman World. And it begins with this amazing premise. I hope you can say this. Men went extinct almost 80 years ago. How different would you think the world would be if they were still around? And then there is a beautiful retort by saying, actually, I think the world would be the same. Men weren't that different from us. So you can understand, this is from the New Yorker. You can understand Aminder crossed a lot of boundaries. She began to be published in New Yorker. But before that, she was actually publishing on net. You can actually find all Aminder's work in the internet. It is from internet where she began her conversation. Okay, so and the entire novel that is actually in print can be read in the internet. The tactility of of changing pictures, in the internet, the way you change, press the button and change the picture, the way the whole the internet becomes so accessible because it is free. If you want to make it a free place, of course, if you don't put up a paywall, you actually make the thing accessible to everybody. You actually also go beyond the distribution issues, for example, because you don't have to think of the physical book, because the physical book has so many costs that you have to overcome in the publishing industry to make it accessible to everybody. So what Aminder did was she created this this comic completely on the net. So can you see, this is Aminder's comic. This is first, so you can actually scroll sideways, down, up, everything, and you can get the comic. So you can see this is part 2. For example, in the book itself, there is a page where, one of the girls says, we need a flag for our district. The answer is, what about a vagina? But vagina don't represent the scope of womankind. So you can understand there is a lot of theoretical thought process behind every utterance that is being put out on the net. So we don't need something that inspires strength, invokes empathy, screams endurance. Let us call it Beyonce's thighs. Look at the way the popular culture and the critical idiom are all floating together to create a very unique point of view that every woman actually has. Okay, so that is what I want to talk about, because if you have something to tell in a very humorous way, right manner, if you want to take on the world your way, and you don't want to censor it, you want to absolutely talk about in an unmitigated, direct way, I think net is the way. Web comics is the way to go, and it is very easy to put on because most of it will be free. What you need is a pen and pencil, a scanner, or a tab, whatever you want. You just draw, write, put it on the net, and you bang, it is there for everybody to see and comment. Another interesting thing about webcomic is that you can always engage in a conversation. So if you post in a blog, you can reply back immediately. You can have immediate feedback, which is impossible for a book. For a book, you can have a review, and that will be made by specialists. So sometimes you also miss on what I call the feedback of people who are not specialized, but just soaked in the experience, and they loved it or hated it. Whatever the opinion is, you can get an immediate feedback. Similarly, if Woman World was published in the net, so was Cyclopedia Exotica. This is actually Cyclopedia Exotica, and you can see the entire comics was actually published as a scroll experience. You can actually scroll vertically in order to see the comics, and you can see the way the entire comics can be read in a much more what I call different way. This kind look, there is a difference between turning the page and scrolling up and down. Of course, turning the page entails a kind of a physical act that you do. This is also a physical act, but the very idea of turning the paper is very different, paradigmatically completely different from scrolling up and down. So, I wanted to talk about Aminder because she, of course, broke through. She's famous all over now. She's looked upon as a youth icon, but she started in the web. She started with simple drawings, and you can easily understand that the drawings are not the greatest. And she confesses that I'm not the greatest artist, but I talk what I want to say. So she's not a very organized, what I call technically proficient artist, but she just tells a story. She just narrates her own, personal, confessions, and that is where Aminder is so important. So in India, of course, Aminder is from Canada, although she belongs to the Indian diaspora, and she's of course writing very, very recently. So Aminder's, is published last year. This is the encyclopedia is going to be published in 2020. It has been just published in 2020, while Woman's World was published 3 years ago. In India, the whole thing started in 2014, and there was a woman called Aarti Parthasarathi who started this website, a kind of webcomic, which is called Royal Existentials. And as you can easily understand, if you look at the webcomic, this is the first called The Problem of Patriarchy. Okay? You can read the Royal Existentials if you wish. I can give you all the addresses. But what is very interesting is that, Aarti is actually playing on the Mughal miniature painting. And as you can understand, the Mughal miniature painting depict the woman in a particular way. They are depicted as objects of desire. The way they are, the entire, body is drawn, the way it is represented, and the way the male gaze negotiates its place in the composition of the painting itself, is quite problematic. So what she does, she conflicts, the earlier Mughal miniature, tries to create contemporary stuff using the Mughal miniatures. So if you look at the Royal Existentials, this is one of the page. You can actually just go on. These are all single page stories. So it is something that you can easily, so this is the next story, for example. You can easily see that, the Mughal miniatures along with, new kind of, what I call overlay, done, overlay with speech bubbles, done with a kind of a font which is known as the Eurocomic font, a very common font used for comics, gives it a very contemporary age. So, at once you are negotiating between memory and contemporaneity. Okay? The very idea of memory, the way it transfers, and so there is a lot of course, nostalgia associated with Mughal miniature painting, but also a lot of what I call issues that otherwise wouldn't have been discussed, okay, can be somehow kaleidoscopically represented through this. So, you can just go on, looking at the Royal Existentialist, website for more. Like if you really want, this of course is not a new phenomena. Using this kind of old paintings in order to talk about contemporary gender issues is not new. In fact, the inspiration behind Aarti's work is one by David Malki. David Malki, for example, used Victorian paintings to talk about the problems of patriarchy in contemporary, seen through contemporary prism. So that was already there. So probably Malki inspired Aarti Parthasarathi to create Royal Existentials. Okay? There is another one which I want to show. This is Inedible India, and the person behind is Rajesh Rajamani. So for example, here of course, instead of Mughal miniature painting, you have the calendar art of Raja Ravi Verma. You can easily understand that Raja Ravi Verma, inspired a whole pantheon. The way we depict our goddesses, for example, the way, the male gaze constructs the epitome of what I call Indian beauty, what people call, everybody calls Indian beauty, is probably filtered through the calendar art of Raja Ravi Verma. So, what Rajesh does is Rajesh takes on that patriarchal gaze and turns it back with a very contemporary reference. So the whole idea of starting Inedible India, the title Inedible India is very, very interesting. I interviewed Rajesh, and he told me that I wanted to keep the title Inedible because I really don't know what is palatable to Indian conscience. I am not sure. So I will actually talk about things that are not palatable to the establishment, to the way we Indians look at certain things in certain cursory manner. So both Royal Existentials, for example, or Inedible India, they are like private projects. They didn't invest any money except their labor, passion, and their love for the art, and the way they wanted to express themselves. They talked about issues that are otherwise swept under the carpet. There are other webcomics which I want to talk about. This one is beautiful. This one is called if you can see Travelogue, which is basically a diary. I think the very idea of diary as a souvenir of thoughts, as a kind of a place where you can scroll, doodle your unformed thoughts, is actually full of great possibilities, especially when a woman is writing about her own life, is trying to negotiate the way she goes about her life. And this is by Attoja Pandey. And again, you can easily scroll or click to go to the next comic. These are all free. You can easily access them. There is no paywall. There is no bar. And technically, of course, theoretically, it's probably the most democratic way of taking your work to the public. Okay, so if you can see, I have talked about Aminder, I have talked about, Arti Parthasarathi and Royal Existentials, of course, Rajesh Rajamani's brilliant Inedible India, as well as Travelogue by Attoja Pandey. Let me talk about, something else now, because unless probably, I sometimes feel uncomfortable not to show my face because I'm just presenting blindly. This is Aminder's book. I think you can see it. Can you see this? I think I'm visible, right? Okay, so this is Aminder's book, but you don't need to buy the book. You can access everything through net. So what I'm trying to say is that internet is a great medium to talk about yourself. And no publisher. Say if you get rejected by the publisher, that doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter because you can always create your own thing and make people read. Okay. So let me go again to the next things. Of course, these are what happened. Of course, in India, one event changed the way comics began to be created, and that is of course the Nirbhaya incident that shook the entire country. And there was this person called Ram Devineni, along with Dan Goldman, who began to create a comics called Priya's Shakti. Now again, these are free comics. If you wish to get these comics, I can always send PDFs of these comics. But what Ram does is very, very interesting. If you can see the figure of Priya, the girl, who is sitting on a tiger. The tiger is called Sahas, that means courage. Sahas in Hindi, Bengali, whatever is called courage. And she has behind her Parvati, the goddess. So what happened was, this is actually a story of Priya who was raped and was completely stigmatized by the family and the village in which she lives. She of course later confronts the rapists because she got the Shakti of Parvati. Parvati came within her. She became a superwoman, and with the help of the tiger Sahas, she actually teaches. Of course, she kills the rapist. She takes, she gets against the rapist. So this is a way where you can employ mythology. I'm not a fan of the art because the art is too psychedelic for me. It could have been done better, but whatever. But look at the content, for example, where you can easily integrate a story and, integrate a story with kind of mythological ideas and then subvert it to give it a contemporary spin. Of course, the story becomes a story of resistance as well, and it became a kind of an inspirational story. Okay, so this is Priya Shakti. Now what happened was Ram followed it up with another word called Priya's Mirror. Here, of course, the very well-known scriptwriter Paramita Bora also, you can see Paramita's name. Paramita also participated. I'm sorry for the technical issues that I'm having. But anyway, so Priya's Mirror, this is actually about the acid attack victim. So the same titular character, Priya, is there the tiger sahas, but Priya riding the tiger. It's a very common image that you see in this comic. But here the issue is about woman whose figure has been disfigured, whose profiles has been disfigured by acid attacks. Again, Priya takes on the adversaries in a true superwoman style. The last one that you have, the first one was published around 2014. Priya's Mirror was published in 2016, and the last one, 2019, is actually based on real-time interviews that Ram Devinani had with with the girls at Shunagachi, the kind of trafficking that takes place. There also you can see there are collaborations. Of course, Ruchira Gupta and of course D.P. Mehra both collaborated because they integrated real stories of girls who have been trafficked, and they are made part of the narrative. So again, you can see a very contemporary issue being taken apart or probably being talked about in a very interesting way. But this would have been unremarkable if not for what happened later. And this is something I want to talk about, because Priya's Mirror or Priya Shakti or Priya and the Lost Girl are not one of references. What the creator did was they actually created an augmented reality street art. So, for example, they took this book, they distributed the book for free in regional languages, so they translated it into regional languages and distributed it for free, especially in the slums. Next, they began to create graffiti all around. I remember, amazing what, have you seen Kolkata's graffiti called the Missing Girl? The Missing Girl graffiti by Kejriwal, the wonderful conceptual art that you can see on and off in Kolkata streets. That was part of awareness campaign that happened, in order to make people more aware of the kind of trafficking that happens. There, Priya Shakti, you can see, you can actually, if you actually use an app called the Flipper Art app, you can put the app before the graffiti and a story will happen. So if you can scan the app, so this is amazing. So you can see there, if you scan the app, then suddenly a story can happen in the app. So the very idea of taking art to the last, person in the street, to the person who matters. Very frequently we live in edifices, we live in marble towers, we never come down. This is what art should be, this is what writing should be, and socially aware comics, this is the last thing, this is the thing that you want, this is the first thing that you want, and the last thing that you want, okay, is to actually create something which can trigger a kind of a movement, trigger a kind of a different kind of, so it may actually, we can think of an alternative world if even one person gets inspired by this comic. So if you go to various places in Delhi and Bombay, you can see how Priya's Shakti or the character of Priya became a kind of a social movement. I think that's a very, very important thing to talk about. Okay, after Priya's, after this, let me also show you one interesting thing. Of course, the Nirbhaya incident actually stoked off a lot of angst, and many artists came out. This one, for example, Drawing the Line, this was an anthology that was created from a workshop where actually 16 women began to write about the representation of women in the psyche, in Indian psyche, how women are represented, how they see themselves in the society, how they are looked upon, what are the stereotypes that are, commonly attached. This was done by Priya Kurian and also Larissa Bartonasco and Ludmila Bartrash. They are actually part of a feminist magazine called Spring Magazine from Germany, who collaborated with, of course, people here. Jodha Press, for example, sometimes collaborated. This is Juvenile Collaboration. Jodha Press, they all collaborated to create this kind of anthology. I think this is, this is, of course, I have drawing the line with me. This is a Juvenile Collaboration. So I don't know whether you can see it. This is a Juvenile Collaboration. Now, if we see what is inside, I think this will be very, very interesting. So if you look at the Juvenale's work, for example, let me show you some of Juvenale's work. So this is one by Priyanka Kumar called Ever After. And if you can see, they are very bold kind of work. They are work that talks about, they're like interior monologues, that a woman has, that every woman has, whoever she may be, and the kind of dialogue that she cannot have with a man, for example. These are like what I call, very personal expiations of some kind or the other. So you can see the speech bubble here. This is very, very interesting. The speech bubble here doesn't contain any words because there is nothing to say. First of all, if you can see, I don't know whether you can see this. If you can see, this part has, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. Okay, so if you can see this, first of all, this is an interesting mirror picture, and then what you have is one part of the dialogue box you have serrated waves, another part you have very straight waves. So they are like yin and yang. They somehow cannot mix. The yin and yang symbol is created. So sometimes you cannot share this with another person because these are extremely personal conversations, and that needs to be brought out. That needs to be talked about because frequently we look at women, girls, the way society wants you to look at, and that needs to change. So this, for example, is a very good idea. I think this is brilliant. This work by Soma Menon called An Ideal Girl from that same anthology, actually talks about the expectations of an ideal girl that every Indian, society has. So you can actually think of Kamala Das's an introduction while reading this. An ideal boy is well educated and cultured. The ideal girl was well educated, of course, yet they are encouraged to pursue her hobby, not as an art though, or even as a skill, but just as a role like any other. For traditionally decreed, this was the prospective bride's way of earning her dowry. The ideal girl well educated and cultured too. The ideal boy is well settled. The ideal girl juggled her household, family and job well without any help from ideal boy, who showed up from time to time to take away her earnings, making her wish he stayed away for good. She could certainly do without him. The ideal girl is well settled. So you can understand the biting satire in every line, the kind of humor that talks to every person, that is so immediately recognizable, that sometimes every woman feels about a male, about a husband, about a boyfriend, about a friend, about everybody, So the kind of rage that is building within can be taken out as a kind of a catharsis in the way you draw. And believe me, you don't need to draw that well, okay, in order to talk about things. For example, this is by a comic strip by called Sanitary Panels, and as you can understand here, the sanitary panels, you can easily understand, is not drawn that well. It is not as if it is drawn that well. Rachita, who actually manages sanitary panels, she says that even if you can draw stick figures, I think you can convey your emotion. So it is not necessary that you can draw. It is not necessary that you can draw well. You have to draw, but it is not necessary that you can draw well. So for example, this panel, for example, are you an Indian woman looking for a husband? Learn how to compromise, be agreeable and adjusting. More important, are not a person with your life goals and dreams, you are property. So can you imagine the power of these panels? But you don't need to be a great painter. You don't need to be a great, amazing, technically proficient artist to convey what you wish to do. You can do it in a very simple manner by drawing stick figure 7. So it is not important, it is not a priority for anybody to be an accomplished artist, express yourself. As the great comic artist Linda Barry says, draw, and draw badly. Draw, scroll badly. That is your scroll. That is the mark that you make on the paper the way you want to. You cannot conform to the way others want you to be. Be yourself. So if you scroll, if you are untidy in the way you draw, if you actually, you cannot be proper in the way people want you to be that. Be improper. Be untidy. Be what you wish to be. And that is what sanitary panels, I think, this webcomic teaches us. Let us go to another anthology, which is amazing, and it is called The Elephant in the Room. There may be some more time, and I'll just talk about this, and there are some more which I want to talk about. So this anthology, The Elephant in the Room, and this is again with collaboration with the Spring Collective, Juvenile and Spring Collective coming together, the same people behind, drawing the line anthology. But here, I think every barriers are broken. The women talk about their sexuality in a much more frank manner, and I must tell you, the results are amazing. If you wish to read this, I can send it to you, or you can buy this. My Secret Crop. Of course, you are talking about pubic hair here, but this is by Kaveri Gopalakrishna. It's part of growing up, and this is something that you normally not talk about. You normally sometimes feel shameful about, because there is nobody to guide you. And what Kaveri talk about, negotiation that she has to do herself while coming to terms with her changed anatomy, with her changing anatomy. Kaveri's work is amazing. I think the way she talks about sexuality, and comics, I think, is that form that can actually talk about sexuality in a very wry, humorous manner. It is where you can negotiate with sexuality in a way that cannot do, for example, sometimes in other media. Because, there are many ways where you can do it, but I think the element of humor, the element of realization, the element of, feeling becomes very, tangible in the way comics actually are, done. Or Prabha Malia's Pitch. Of course, that's a beautiful work which is there. And if you can see, she represents the beach. As you can see, beach, she wears the pants. Who is called the beach? Somebody who wears the pants. And again, there is a dog, a female dog being drawn. There is no humans there. Beach, like her coffee black. Beach, where is your bra? So you can understand, the way, the beach, the drawing of the beach also plays on social conventions and expectations and subversion in ways that has never been seen. And that's the way I think you can make people aware of sexuality in a much more frank manner. It's at least like coming out, and this is something that we should all negotiate at one point of our life. If you're talking about sexuality, nothing beats the next example that I want to give. A very complicated, thing like period, for example. Periods. How do you teach a girl? How do you talk to girls about something that is normally never talked about, even by the mothers? And that is why Aditi Gupta came out with the Menstrupedia comic. If you if you can watch Aditi Gupta's TEDx talk as well, she's amazing. Just search Aditi Gupta Menstrupedia TEDx, you can get the talk. But the Menstrupedia comic does something unimaginable. Now this is, of course, Aditi is now giving it free to students from class 7 to class 10. And you can see that, through comic, you are actually talking about anatomy. And it doesn't seem crude. It doesn't seem, it doesn't seem puerile. It is something which you can actually learn from. So comics as a tool, as an educational tool, where you can actually learn about something, about health issues, for example. Here, of course, something that you definitely need to know. Okay? I think even, every boy, every girl needs to know all these things, because if you ever ask a very grown-up boy about periods, for example, you can draw a blank, and you'd never normally talk about this in public. So comics becomes a very interesting medium to talk about this in public. Let me go beyond this again. Let me go to, for example, heavy critical work. Even that can be talked about. These two girls, just remember these two girls. Of course, one is Pia. This is Pia Hazarika. The left side. In the left side is Pia Alice Hazarika. On the right is Malati. Okay, Lata Malati, and they have created something called, and you can see this, the feminist, AF, the feminist primer for everybody. And here they are actually dissecting the critical theory that we were talking about. They are actually talking about feminism being something that cannot, be a kind of a one fit category. There are many kind of feminisms. It's like a plural. It's about plurality more than anything else. So, for example, but I love men, I am not a feminist. Look at the responses. The responses are taken from their conversations, with their friends. I am a guy, I cannot be a feminist. I am more of a humanist. So, these are responses that you get when you talk about feminism. And, so if you think women are human beings who deserve to lead full human lives, congratulations, you are then a feminist. So if you look at Malati Jaggi and Pia Alice Hazarika, they are trying to talk about what I call intersectionality. These are very complicated terms, if you know. And intersectionality of feminism is very, very important if you want to talk about plurality. Okay? So, so they actually, create what I call a crossroad where race, class, caste, sexuality and gender can meet. And all of us can talk together about something which is very, very important, which demands attention. So, again, this is another example which you can see. Now, if you go beyond, the feminist references purely, if you look at the idea, the queer space, there also things have happened. Okay? Before that, let me also show you one of the work by Odijit Sen. This is called a Travancore Tale, and it is a tale of a woman who cut off her breast. Remember, if you know the legend, this is a legend of Nangeli. Nangeli's legend is very well known. In Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, of course, you cannot, only the Nayars and the Nambuduris, their top halves of the body, their females can cover their breasts, the lower sections of the people within court cannot do so. So, in order to enforce, there was a tax that was created called the, Mulakkaram, okay, which all the low caste women had to pay if they dared to cover their breasts, okay? And of course, the tax was calculated in a very, very, I think, an insulting manner. The tax was calculated according to the size of their breasts. So the larger the breasts, the higher the taxes. And Nangeli, when somebody came to collect the tax, actually cut off her breast in order to talk about resistance. She wanted to resist it, and she resists it. the examination of the body by another person by cutting of her breast. Okay, so this is an amazing tale by Arijit Sen, and I think as had the kind of intersectionality that happens, the caste politics and ideas, when feminism, caste politics all actually meet together, in crossroads. Comics can be a wonderful place to talk about that. This is also another work by Arijit Sen and Neha Dixit. That is actually, this is reprinted in another anthology called the First Hand Anthology Volume 2, where again the idea, the trafficking, girl trafficking is taken upon, but this is based on a real report. So Arijit got a real report, made a comic out of that, and you can see there is a beautiful, again, a superwoman-like character called Ladli, who, in a way, actually goes on to protest. So there are references to the Nirbhaya incident again. So look at the kind of protest ostensibly led by Ladli. But this is, of course, a very mass protest that happened. And, basically, the struggle against patriarchal customs, systems, laws, that are documented in various, NGOs, in reports of NGOs, they can be made very interesting and accessible through comics, and that is what Arijit Sen has done through these two comics. But if you go beyond, I'll just complete this by giving you two more examples, and then it can be open to questions. For example, even government sometimes, I have shown it earlier as well, West Bengal government has actually created the kind of a comics called Uttoron on the Konyashree scheme. This is not done very well, but I think the idea is very nice, that you actually make people understand the scheme of Konyashree through comics, because many people, they don't know what the schemes is all about. So I think visual, sequential art can do a lot of things that, conventional novels, conventional discourses cannot do. I think that's where I think comics becomes such an important, accessible tool for disseminating ideas which otherwise would be very difficult to convey to people, to the last person standing. And for me, if you really want to do, talk about gender issues, you need to percolate it to the last person, to the very last person. And unless you do so, you are actually not talking about it in a democratic manner. So you can see this, of course, but something actually is also happening beyond this space, and we are talking about the queer space. And please tag this. This is called the Gazy magazine, and the Gazy scene is actually the gay they see together becomes Gazy, and you can easily understand that they are a free site, but some of their books are not free. They actually try to create a conversation through comics. Okay, the very idea of queer, sometimes, is so complicated to negotiate. Okay, so we may fall back on theories of Butler and others, but they are not for everybody to understand. So in order to take these complicated theories to the last possible person, I think comics becomes a very, very interesting, medium. Before I close, let me show you something that is happening in Bangladesh, for example. And this is a project called Thi by the boys of Bangladesh. And Thi is again about queer. So what they did was, this is also sponsored by the UNESCO, it became so popular. So what they did was, they didn't publish a comic, but they did what I call comic cards. So, and if you look at this comic cards, this is written in Bengali, but if you translate it, it is again about what a girl, it's about the conformity that the girl had to undergo in order to locate herself, and he is actually against that. He is in a way a breath of fresh air, and it talks against that kind of conformity. Again, he is a brilliant work, and if you can look at it, there are differences to, differences between gender, sex, what is gender, what is the difference between gender and sex, because these are things again which is very complicated to navigate. So for example, the world of the boys and the girls, the way they are separated in our society, this is Bangladesh, which is not too different from our society. So you can see the way it can be done through comics. For example, a that Tomaler Dari Udithiti, mustache is growing in face of Tomal. The voice is also breaking. Don't you feel shameful that you are talking about this? So you can understand these are about small conversations that occur. Look at the way, hey, Rashid puro ekta half ladies. The way you categorize people by their look, by their appearance, okay? And you don't want to talk about, sexual orientation in an open way. Dost, be a man. Look at the way, these things are actually talked about. So these are like cards. So one part of the card have the comic, and the back part you have actually explanation in the vernacular. So once you actually read the comic, you can actually also read what you are talking. So, for example, heterosexuality. This is the card, and at the back, what is heteronormativity or heterosexuality that is written. I think, so for example, so for example, what is homosexuality, for example. So again, you have a card, and then you have explanations that comes later. So, I think this is a brilliant way. You can just go on, looking at the cards. They are beautiful to look at. This is again, let me stop sharing and get back. I don't know whether I don't know whether I made sense of what I was talking about. But what I really wanted to tell you, and what I really wanted to tell you is that, we as professors, we as teachers, we try to complicate things unnecessarily sometimes. We sometimes, don't regard the last man in the street, the last woman in the street to be a receptor to our ideas. How to overcome that? Just teaching them theory in a very abstract manner, will that do any good? Will that do any good? I mean, of course, it can create more APIs and more papers, and it can load your CVs. But what about really reaching out to the community? So when you are talking about gender, when you are talking about male gaze, for example, you cannot just theorize it. Even if you theorize it, try to make it accessible to the last person who has nothing to fall back upon. We have text discourses, also our social securities to fall back upon. There are people who have nothing to fall back upon. What do? How do you educate them so that they can fight back? So that they can actually take part in the active process of resistance. I think that's the question that we need to ask ourselves. There is no good, in just conducting webinars and, just sweeping everything under the carpet and never talk about these issues. I think it is very, very important to disseminate your work to the last possible person. With this end, I actually end my lecture. I have more examples to show you. Unfortunately, the time is not much. I can just write a book on it probably. But, I think it's a very complicated negotiation that we are seeing today. So I think even every author should be, especially comic writers, comic artists, should also think of the way to reach me. And I cannot overstress the fact more and more. So I end. I'm sorry if I've completely bored you people. I'm sorry for this. I may have bored you people. It's not a conventional academic talk. It's actually about. So it's just about trying to take things directly. And this is more proactive kind of thing that you can do. I always tell my students how you can contribute to the conversation, how you can join the conversation, and how you can take the conversation to the girl who doesn't know what you know. That's the way you should really, spread the word. That is the way you educate more and more people. That is the way you sorry, I mean, I just blabbered a bit.
Dr. Pinaki, thank you so much. Before my
Yeah.
students already thanks you, I
Okay.
must mention here, because there are a lot of things coming to my mind when you were speaking.
Yes.
No wonder a fascinating one. We had a discussion the other day about what
Yes.
we were to speak about it, and this is an attempt that we always take at our
Yes, I know that.
especially geared towards the upliftment and the empowerment of women beyond academics, beyond APIs, beyond marks. What is most important is a woman should have an identity which
Yes.
isn't the academic, which isn't be just a 10-hour job. It's something that where the process of self-expression should be there. So what said, certain things struck a deep chord within me, I'm sure with all my colleagues. The fact that this part of the talent that they have, many of my students have, and you're familiar with them, that we should tap this talent, trying to explore a kind of alternative vocation, which could be comics,
Right.
which could be
Anything.
writing through
Yes.
comics, exactly. So I think I'm sure my students and from all over the country have thoroughly enjoyed your talk. And now I call upon my student Episode who's going to thank you on behalf of the students for this wonderful presentation which you gave. It was actually a very vibrant dialogue actually.
Yeah, it was not a paper or such. I don't read papers because I'm already bored of it.
Okay, so over to you, yes.
On the behalf of the Department of English, Diamond Harbour Women's University, I'd like to propose my hearty vote of thanks to our honored guest, Dr. Pinaki, for gracing our welcome. Thank you, sir, for such an engaging and fun.
Thank you. So do I need to take questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. K, for this enthralling presentation. It was an invigorating visual tour through the complex theories of gender and sexuality. And it was a learning experience for me as well. Thank you so much. Now we'll go to the questions which have been coming in. And we'll found some of the questions reappearing in different guises. And
Okay.
the three to four people, as them also, some of them are our students. Sharona Bush, Preeti Mukherjee, Smara Parveen, they have all kind of observed and have made a request for these questions, and I think the idea of the question was similar. They request you to elaborate on the differences between the male comic and the male artist and the female artist, and how do you see them?
How differently, yeah. Yes. So, for example, of course, an artist is an artist. Of course, it's very, very difficult to, separate the two. But in case of women artists, what I see, I see really something else. Look at the way. If you look at it's not as if the male artist cannot write autobiographies or personal, memoirs or something like that. But we see it more frequently in the way the woman artists represent themselves. Of course, the woman doesn't draw differently. It's not as if they, everybody draws differently because everybody has a signature of their own. So every artist in that sense is there. But I think when you are a woman in a country like India, you are struggling to overcome certain prejudices. Okay, and those prejudices are actually built. Inbuilt in our society. And remember, those prejudices are also there in the publishing world. I come from a publishing world, and it is not, I think things have improved a lot, but I have seen the kind of prejudices that are also there in the publishing world. So, for example, in the comics world, so for example, when you actually do a comics, a girl is supposed to do comics in a certain way. So, a girl will do a teenage comics about, say, a love story. That is what she is expected to, as if, a male cannot do that kind of comic. Only a girl can do this, very uniquely feminine, within quote, take on certain things. So that is what they are expected of. So what I'm trying to say is, the way women artists are negotiating that expectation is what makes them different. So they are actually trying to suffer. So what you have seen in all the artists that I have shown you, they are trying to go beyond the stereotypes that they are expected to conform to. So they are not writing, goody-goody, wishy-wishy stories, love stories, romantic stories that you normally should expect them to write, or, the kind of family sagas and all that you expect them to write. They are actually taking on those very stereotypes that they are compartmentalized within. So, I look at women's writing as a kind of resistance to those stereotypes. I just tell you one thing. So, whenever we, when we start a conversation with a woman, the first thing we say, so what you do? Are you married? As if, the very idea of marriage, you ask a boy, are you married? No, you don't do it, The first question that you ask a girl is that because you are expected to, put her in a kind of a space, which is like, the domestic space from where, she can do a lot of things. But, these people take on these stereotypes. These people fight against this expectation. So as women writers, I found them extremely, what I call revolutionary, especially in the woman context, in the Indian context. They are revolutionary in the way they defeat those systemic expectations and pen their own stories. They have the guts to talk about their own sexuality. They have the guts about things that people feel, that people normally ignore. They are ignored, they are never heard. They have the guts to tell what they really feel, the gut feeling, that I think in that sense, say look at Amruta, look at the new woman comic artists that I have shown you. I think they are unique. They are unique, and you cannot just club them with any other writers. They are what I call emblematic of the resistance that is happening, from down, not from top down, but from down to top. I think that's where I think the woman, artists should be spent. Look at the publication. Have you seen how many women artists are published? One question I want to ask everybody: how many of these are published? They are all in the internet, right? They are not published. So this, except Amruta and Aminder, they were not published. Aminder is a recent publication. Even Sanitary Panels is not published. Royal Existentialist is not published. They are in the web. The very fact that they have to take themselves to the web because they probably have been denied publication shows that kind of systemic problem, that also affects our, publishing industry. I think if you look at it, you have to doff your hat off because they are fighting a lot more barriers than we do as male artists. I think they are actually fighting more problems. They are fighting them valiantly, and they are emerging winners. That's where I think the whole story lies. They are winners in every sense of the term. Yeah. So they are different. They are not different because they are artists, but they are different in the way they fight. They resist. I'm sorry, I'm just...
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we move on to the next question. Devdatta Basu, he asks, is the image of Lord Shiva behind Devi Parvati in Priya's Shakti a symbol of the ideal man, which is used in present society?
Yes, I think wonderful observation, and that is what great eyes do. I think Ram Pinaki came for criticism for that. As if for him Shiva was a kind of chaos, that is released. But I was not too sanguine. I was not too convinced with his idea. The very fact of putting Shiva behind Parvati and making him the larger-than-life figure, I think it's very problematic. Wonderful observation. But you are right. I think it's very problematic. I agree with her. It's very problematic.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. Next question is by Rituparna Gupta, and she asks, is there any comic artist in India who talks about the sexual liberation of women and child labor too? Of course, sexual liberation is something that you have addressed.
I have addressed, but child labor I haven't seen. So I ask you to write the next comic because it's such a baby kind of a genre. Things are developing, and you can do your film, you can write your comics, but I think you should start. If there is nothing there, yeah, you are the one to start it. Yes, there may be one or two NGOs who have worked on it. There are some pamphlets, but I haven't seen substantial work regarding child labor. No, I haven't seen it. So it may be there. I haven't seen it. I haven't encountered, and I do read a lot of comics. So yeah.
Okay. Now there's a comment from Sinorita Mujumdar, and she says, I would like to comment on the cartoon by Priyanka Kumar when a man and a woman are sitting on a table talking, and the bubble speech of the woman is crooked, whereas the bubble speech of the man is presented in straight line.
Yes.
Straight line. So, do you think it manifests the stereotypical idea that women think in a complicated way, whereas men don't?
Wonderful observation. So you have read it, so I haven't explained it, but she has read it perfectly, pitch perfect. You are right. That's the way. And they are like yin and yang, but they are so different from each other in the thought processes, and and they don't collapse into each other. They do collapse into each other, but there is always a separator. That doesn't dissolve. I think that is a telling comment of the way we look at a woman. The way we have categorized, certain things about women. I think the wonderful observation. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, very impressed. I think they were listening to my talk after all. I thought that they were not listening.
They're fascinated, absolutely.
I thought that
so we move on to the next question by Anup Roy. And,
Yes.
and he asked, Sir, in Adventures of Tintin, we see a woman character, Bianca Castillo, who doesn't play a major role. Apart from that, we see women characters throughout the series. So if you have anything to say
it's a
about
very
it,
different question. I don't know whether I'll take it, but yes, he is right. I don't call Arja, a misogynist. So it's very harsh on him. But yes, I don't see many women characters, of course, except for Bianca Castafiore. And again, Bianca Castafiore is a certain kind of a woman. You understand? She's stereotyped as a certain kind of a woman. If you look at even the adventures, she doesn't appear too much except for the Castafiore emerald, right? She appears, infrequently. I think it's a question that I'll not take, but if he really wants to know the answer, he can write to me. I think it may not be too relevant, because if I talk about Tintin now, I will actually go beyond the ambit of this seminar, and it can just spiral out of my control. Okay, but I think he's right, partly right, but but to draw a direct conclusion would be a bit harsh. So it will be in between. But I think you are right. Bianca Castafiore doesn't play an important role, and you don't see women characters, and they are drawn in a particular way. Have you seen the way they draw the Indian characters, Arch? I don't think Arch takes so much pain in drawing every character, but he doesn't get the Indian characters wrong. He doesn't get the way Indian women wear saris right. Okay? So, there are a lot of stereotypification in art. We know that, and that's there. So, yeah. So maybe if he writes to me, I can write my email, so if you can write to me, I will answer, of course. Yeah, I've written the email, so
okay.
yeah.
So next, the person is Tanushri Mondol,
Yes.
and she asks, what methods are to be adopted in order to get wide readership of comics in India?
Very
And because she's also adds to this that comics and forms of mangas and webtoons in Japan and South Korea are hugely popular, and they are not in India. So
Look, Japan is, I don't want to even talk about Japan because it's like a culture thing. It is part of the culture, right? Just like, say football is part of Brazilian culture, manga is part of Japanese culture. It's very difficult to be like that in India. But I think visual things can be wonderful, ways to convey things. I can talk about one person in particular called Sharad Sharma. And do you know what Sharad is doing? Sharad has just published a comic on the Rohingya refugees drawn by the Rohingya refugees themselves. So what he did was he took a pen and pencil, he drew some stick figures, he began to listen to their conversations and actually made them participate in a workshop and draw their own experiences on their own way. And then, the way they participated, the entire refugee camp in Delhi, the way they participated is just, is to be believed, You have to see to believe it. And that's the kind of involvement that you need to do. So what I'm trying to say is that I know comics is not that popular. Films are of course much more popular, but it can be very popular. Say for example, if you include say a comic to talk about health issues, say in class 8, look at the Menstrupedia comic for example. If you actually distribute it to the students of class say 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they will get acquainted with the medium, and it's a very complicated thing, they're told in a very simple manner, and then suddenly you actually become more acquainted with the medium. So there are ways of making it popular. I know it is not as popular as things are in Japan or South Korea, but it can be, because it is such a wonderful medium. It's also a very cost-effective medium, because you don't need film. Film is not cost-effective. Do you think film is cost-effective? No. To make your own film, it is not easy. But I think comic is easier to make, because you just need a pen, pencil, and some ideas to start it. But in films, you need more. So what I'm trying to say is that films will always remain popular, but you can always have alternative, things which can be talked about. Alternative avenues through which it to be disseminated. So it's not about popularity context. It's not about having a blockbuster comic. It's not about that. It's actually about conveying ideas. It can be through comic and other means as well. I have no problem. I think comics is a very cost-effective and easy way of doing things. So, for example, tourism. If you want to spread tourism, for example, if you want to do a brochure, for example, if you do it in a comics manner, I think people will be more interested. They will not throw the brochure away. They will probably look at it, and maybe some people will be interested in the visuality of the brochures. That may be a good beginning. I'm not telling that comics is right now popular, will be the blockbuster of the time where everybody influences everyone. No. What I'm trying to tell is that it can be a wonderful start. And that is where you need to start somewhere. It will grow popular. It will grow much popular than whatever it is now. That much I can tell you. A lot of us actually look down upon comics as something that is only talked about for children. In our country, for example, in Bengal, Hada Boda, Batul, Nonte Fonte are things that everybody has read. But they are regarded as frivolous. They are regarded as children's stuff. They are not regarded as something serious. But if we actually talk, you can write a medical prescription in comics. Do you know? Nick Susanis, a person, has actually written a comic book called Unflattening from not a small university, from Columbia University. That is his thesis on chemistry. A chemistry thesis written completely in comics. There is a person here called Orgo Manna, who works in Ananda Bajar, very good friend, who is talking about the history of science and contribution of women in science through comics. So let's make a start. It's not about the popularity context. I know I will always lose to films, but let's not avoid other things. Why comics? There may be other things, graffiti for example. What are that? The medium that you can also look at. So it's not only about photography, can be another thing that you can look at. So I'm not too sacrosanct about comics. It's not a mono-meat thing that I want to, push everything through comics. No. I think comics is a beautiful way to do things in a certain manner, which any other things cannot do. But there are certain advantages that comics have, which we should take advantage, which we should take care of. I'm sorry, I just get very passionate while talking about these things. But I always tell people it's not about popularity. It's not about how popular you are. It's not about how popular you can be. It's like a film, everybody talks about 100 crore, 200. I don't care about 100, 200 crore film. I actually care about a film that will talk to you. I care about things that will talk to you. Once it talks to you, I don't care whether it's a one-page comic or it's just one comic. I don't care. But it's a wonderful medium. That's why I think the conversation should start.
Thank you, Dr. K, for this elaborate explanation. We move on to the last question. The last question for today. Can contemporary, this is by one of our former students, Shamima Parveen.
Oh, yes.
Can contemporary comics be called heterotopias, mirroring the predicaments of the other, where writers are using the pen to portray the issues of the unvoiced? Yes.
Yes, I think one good way to put it, yes, she is absolutely right. And I don't want to again dwell on, the heterotopic implication of it, but I think she has hit the nail on the rightly. I mean, absolutely right. Yes, but if you really want to talk about it in detail, you can write back to me. I think I can give you more materials which will be a bit theoretical, because when we talk about comics here, I haven't talked about what I call the visuality of it. I haven't explained, I haven't analyzed how the panels work, how that heterotopia are constructed. I haven't talked about it. So if she's really interested, if you are really interested, you can just write to me, and I can give you certain ways to read visuality. And if you can read visuality in a certain way, I think her idea, her heart is at the right place. So she just needs to read something up in order to understand this better. But I think it's too big a question to answer really. But I think she's right. Yes, I think she has got the talk. I think she has got what I wanted to tell. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Indra, do you have anything to add to this?
So I think we have had a very fruitful interactive session.
Yes.
I think we could go on and on and on, because there are...
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I'm a chatterbox.
No. But that's our profession, isn't it?
Yes.
So,
We are all chatterboxes.
we are chatterboxes. But then there has to be there's a time, and you've been extremely magnanimous to share your email ID. And
Yes.
then Shamima is going to write to you.
Yes, please.
She's seriously going to pursue this career. And there
Yes.
are so many others who are...
I know her, and she is very talented.
Yeah, she's just won herself a place in her cover. Her design was selected on the cover of one of Hardy anthologies brought out from
Wonderful.
Hardy.
Yeah, you must be elated. I mean, it's really great.
And I'm elated because I want many of my students to be inspired by her, and not just my students, all students from the university, and lot of people who are present here today seem to be very interested in comics and graphic illustrations. I can make that out from the kind of questions that are coming.
Yes.
It's like thank you is really a very small word for you.
No, nothing.
Sharing so much with us, so much that was untold. But with this, I think I will now request my colleague Kumara Sarkar to deliver the formal valedictory address. Kumar, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Vandila Ghosh, for inviting me to deliver the valedictory speech of our two-day national webinar on negotiating gender and gaze. On behalf of the department, I sincerely thank both the eminent speakers, Dr. Sutapa Datta yesterday, and now today we have Dr. Pinaki Dey, for kindly accepting our invitation and delivering such wonderful lectures. Yesterday we were teleported to the colonial times for a sneak peek at the Indian Zenana, and today we rediscovered comics through the lens of gender. Madam and sir, you have left us yearning for more, and the Department of English, Diamond Harbour Women's University, is eagerly looking forward to hearing from you once again. And we also sincerely thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Anuradha Mukhopadhyay, for her kind consent and encouragement as ever. We also like to thank our Registrar, Dr. Saidur Rahman, for helping us arrange this webinar. Our vote of thanks is also extended to Professor Papun Mondol, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, for his continuous support in the department's all academic endeavors. Distinguished academicians and participants, we deeply regret all the technical glitches and inconveniences that you had, and sincerely thank you for your kind understanding and enthusiastic participations to make this webinar a fruitful one. I'd also like to request you to kindly visit our official Facebook page as well as the official YouTube channel, and please subscribe so that we could be in touch. We'd also like to thank our students, both past and present, for their enthusiastic participation. You are the biggest stakeholders of the university and the department. So it was your webinar and you have truly made it a success. So with this, I conclude and I thank you all once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar. So, Pinaki, thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope we'll be in touch and you
Yeah.
keep coming back to our department again and again.
Oh, yeah, because of the pandemic is over.
And in better times, obviously, that visit to the department is due.
Yes,
And,
of course.
till then, it's going to be online programs
Yes.
like this.
Right.
So thank you once again, and thanks to all the participants for joining our webinar for these 2 days, and also for encouraging us so much. Your presence and your overwhelming response is the biggest encouragement for a very basic, one of the youngest English departments in West Bengal. So I'm really indebted. Not really me only. I think my entire department is indebted to all the participants who put so much in joining our webinars, and again thanking Shukla for kindly joining with today's section. Also to listen to Pinaka's talk. So both of you, thanks to both of you from the core of my heart. And with this, I conclude our 2-day national webinar. Good night, all of you. Stay well and stay safe.
Thank you.